Good morning, my name is Andrea and I'm a medical herbalist, and I have a diploma in clinical herbal medicine and I graduated in 2002. I am a registered medical herbalist with the New Zealand Association of Medical Herbalists. I'm here today to talk about herbs with you, and it's such an honour and a privilege to be here. So we're going to share about the history and the beginnings and what the blessings are in store for you. So just before I start, I'd just like if you could bow your heads with me so I can say a prayer. Father in heaven, we just come to you in prayer and we just thank you so much for who you are. You're majestic. Nothing can withstand against you. You're our Father in heaven. You're our Saviour. And I just thank you so much for the power of your Holy Spirit, power of your love, power of your name, and power in your blood, that you will just pour out your Spirit on me today and give me your words to speak and your actions, and that I can be a blessing to every single person here who is listening, and lift them up to you and help them on the path to wellness. So let's start at the beginning. In Genesis 1:11-12, and God said, "Let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit, after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth." And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and after the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself, after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And here we have the creation happening. Man has not been made. So God's made all the trees, the fruit, vegetation. He's made everything. And he's looking at it, thinking it is good. This is the beautiful, loving God that we have, is that he is also saying it's good in the fact that he knows that when he makes Adam, he's going to love it. He's going to be able to use it for food and be able to enjoy peace with it as well. So if we move on to Genesis 1:29-30, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every living tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food." So now we have here that God has provided food for Adam and Eve, because Adam and Eve have been made, and he's saying, here, have this for food. If we look just at the different types of plants and the bits that we can use the leaves, flowers, bark, root, and berries and pods. That's what we do as herbalists. Now, the Bible doesn't mention in detail how we use the herbs or how to prepare them, but there's snippets here and there talking about how to use them, and that we can piece it all together. Now, when I first started learning to be a herbalist many years ago, 80% of the world at that time was using traditional and complementary medicine, and I decided to look it up to see what it was now. And it was done in 2019, and it actually takes them about 2 years to do this. And when I looked it up, it actually said that it was 88% of the world using traditional and complementary medicine. And these are the countries that do it. There's different regions. So there's the Africa region, there's also the region of the Americas, and there's Eastern Mediterranean region, European region, the Southeast Asia region, and Western Pacific region. And these places are regulated as well, so they have things in place to make sure that everything's working appropriately. Now let's have a wee look at Romans 14 verse 2. And it says, "For one believeth that he may eat all things, another who is weak eateth herbs." Now what Paul's actually saying here is when we're feeling very weak, we can use herbs to give us strength and stamina. If we look at Genesis 3 verse 18, it says, "Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field." Now what's happened here is, just to give you a little bit of background before that, is Adam and Eve had sinned, and God was talking about now that the earth will be hard, the cursed is the ground, it's really hard to get your veggies going, it's a lot of hard work, and there'll be thorns and thistles. And actually these thorns and thistle type plants, there's some out there that we can use for medicine. So if we look at Rosa canina, which is the dog rose, that is a very thorny sort of plant, but the rose hips are actually very high in vitamin C. And we can use that with hibiscus or hawthorn in teas for the immune system and the skin. You can also use it for allergies with licorice, and as vitamin C can be antihistamine as well. The rosehip oil is very, very popular. They use that for skin conditions, and also just if you have superficial burns, basically if scarring, some people use it for that, and also to reduce wrinkles. If we look at St. Mary's thistle, which is also milk thistle, which is Silybum marianum, you'll notice when you look at that in the leaves, it's got little bits of white through it. So that's the reason why they called it milk thistle. We use the fruit and seed of that, and that's very good for the liver. It's hepatoprotective, so it protects the liver from damage, and it's what they call hepatorestorative, so it restores and nourishes the liver. It's one of my favourite herbs to use. And also if we look at Rubus fructicosus, the ancient Greeks used it as a remedy for gout. Historically in Europe, the decoctions of the leaf were used for hemorrhoids and diarrhea. Today the leaves could be used as a decoction for a gargle or a tonic, and a poultice of the leaves can be applied to abscesses and skin ulcers. The berries themselves are rich in antioxidants and fibre, and people have used that for cancer and whooping cough and other conditions as well. So it's a wonderful, these plants are prickly and yucky to deal with when you're harvesting, but they're very, very medicinal, which is very good. If we look at Exodus 12 verse 8, they shall eat the flesh in that night, roast with fire and unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. So this is actually talking about the Passover, and with the Passover they would have meat and they would have unleavened bread. And the bitter herbs is quite a smart thing to put in there, because when we have something bitter, it actually stimulates the digestive system to do its job. So when it first goes in, you have your amylase, and then it sends messages down to the liver, to the pancreas, to the small intestine and the stomach to produce enzymes to break down that food. And so it does it quite effectively. Luke 11:42, Jesus says, "But woe unto you, Pharisees, for ye tithe mint and rue and all manner of herbs." Now, to give you a bit of a background here, Jesus was rebuking the Pharisees, not because they tithe, but their thoughts were, oh yes, I'm tithing, I'm doing everything okay. What Jesus was a little bit cross at is that they didn't have sound judgment, and they didn't have the love of God in their heart. But what we're actually going to focus on here is the mint and the rue. So the mint appears to be horse mint. Now that grows quite well in Israel. It's a culinary herb over there, so they use it in teas. It's mentha longifolia. They also use it for constipation, fever, common cold, general weakness. And a lot of Bible scholars suggest that this is the biblical herb, which is really good. And if we look at rue, which is Ruta graveolens, which is a very, very old herb. I actually have one in my garden, and it's very, very resilient. This herb is used to bring on menses, to treat worms, to calm the gut, pain, rheumatism, arthritis. May be useful for other anti-inflammatory conditions, but that's rue. And if we look at Isaiah 38 verse 21, it says, "For Isaiah had said, let them take a lump of figs and lay it for a plaster upon the boil, and he shall recover." Now, to give you a wee bit of a background there, King Hezekiah in verse 1 was on his deathbed, and God had actually said to him, this is your time, you're going to die. And he didn't want to die, and he pleaded to God to give him an extended time of his life, and God granted him that. And this is where Isaiah says to take a lump of figs and use it for a plaster on the boil. Well, when I looked up figs, it didn't seem to be antibacterial, but it seemed to be quite high in monoterpenes and other phytochemicals. And over that side of the world, they use it for tumours. So they basically make a paste of it and pop it on the swellings of the skin or tumours. It seems to work well for them over there. Now, if we look at 1 Kings 4, verse 33, and he spake of the trees from the cedar tree that is in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wool. He spake also of beasts, and of fowl, and of creeping things, and of fishes. We look at Exodus 12, verse 22, it says, and ye shall take a bunch of hyssop, and dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel and the 2 posts with the blood in the basin. And Psalm 51, verse 7 says, purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Now, to work out what the biblical hyssop is, it's definitely not Hyssopus officinalis, which is what we use here for upper respiratory conditions. It doesn't grow in Lebanon that I'm aware of, but the Oreganum syriacum, which is the Syrian oregano, and it's also called Syrian hyssop, that grows in Lebanon in the cedar trees and in the mountains, and that's the type that would spring out of the wool. It's really interesting, and that Bible scholars also suggest that is it as well. Now, if we look at in 1758, Linnaeus, which is a Swedish naturalist, he started doing botanical names for different types of species, which took off in the 1800s. So prior to that, they didn't have, botanical names, so they just used common names. And so that's where it might look a bit confusing that it's not an actual hyssop, it's an oreganum. And the other clue is, just to let you know that it's the oreganum one, is that it says that it purges. And so the Oreganum syriacum, which is the Syrian hyssop, that does actually purge through the stools. It helps with parasites and worms. It's also antitussive and expectorant as well, just like the hyssop that we use today. So that's another clue that it's very, very cleansing. And it seems to be the appropriate herb to use to paint the blood on the doorpost, because it's very, very cleansing. Because it's like a symbol of when Jesus is going to come back. Because when Jesus came back later on, he became the Passover lamb, and when he died on the cross, and his blood cleanses us from sin. So when they use hyssop, which is very cleansing, it's very fitting to use that to paint that on the doorposts. Now, as we've discovered, nature is very healing. You're surrounded by birds, hill walks, overlooking oceans. It's spiritually, physically, mentally healing. It's just such a peaceful place to be. And there's so much more we can talk about plants in the Bible, but we don't have enough time. We can do that in a part 2 or another time. And I would just like to leave you with Revelation 22, verse 2. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. I'm looking forward to heaven, having my piece of fruit once a month and my herbal healing tea from the leaves. And I hope to see you there and maybe have a herbal tea with you too. And I hope this has been a real blessing to you and is helping you on the path to wellness. And I hope it gives you as much joy as it has me to share this with you. And God bless you, and have a great week.